It started with the scratching 3 weeks ago. Cyrus Whitman attributed it to thunder being thunder. The stallion had always been a spirited one, proud, intelligent, and obstinate as frozen clay. But recently something was amiss. Every morning at dawn, the same noise rang out against the stable walls. A scraping, steady and keen. Cyrus stood at the barn door on a gray morning, the steam from his coffee curling into the cold, and observed as thunder scraped his hooves against the same spot of wood. Over and over. It wasn't noise to hear noise. It was too deliberate, too intentional. The horse wasn't just nervous. He was attempting to find something. Cyrus had been the owner of the ranch for 15 years. Bought it cheap from a jumpy widow desperate to leave. The land had belonged to old Henrik Voss, a name the locals still murmured about. Officially, Henrik died of a heart attack. But folks whispered about the sudden vanishing of his fortune. One day he was the richest man around. The next he was slumped over in his study chair, broke, and alone. The story never sat right with Cyrus. And now thunder was excavating at a portion of the barn that did not quite fit the rest. He went forward cautiously, not wanting to frighten the stallion. Thunder's dark eyes watched him, too knowing, too intent. When Cyrus extended a hand toward the wall, Thunder stepped back, quietly, steadily, as if giving him permission to proceed. Cyrus touched his fingers along the boards. Something was not right. The wood seemed newer here, soft, unlike the older timber that made up the rest of the barn. Painted to match, but not authentic. He ran his hand along the boards until he detected it. A delicate vertical crack down the middle plank. Subtle, imperceptible to the eye, but distinct beneath touch. Thunder emitted a low, agitated whinny and kicked at the earth, tempting him, prodding him. Cyrus had lived long enough with animals to believe their instincts. They knew what men usually didn't: motions in the air, vibrations in the earth. Things hidden, things buried. He leaned in, put his ear against the wall and knocked softly. Rather than the dull thump that should have greeted him, there was an echo, hollow and undeniable. There was something behind that wall. A space that shouldn't have existed. His heart beat quicker. The stable had been here since long before Cyrus purchased the property. Supposedly, Henrik Voss constructed it himself. But if there was a secret chamber walled in, what had Henrik buried there? And why? Before he could pry further, the rumble of tires on gravel caught his attention. A truck was making its way up the long, private road to the ranch. Someone was approaching, and they may not like him digging into secrets Thunder had uncovered. It was Doc Morrison's pickup, dust-covered and familiar. The local vet had been tending animals in these hills for over 30 years. As he climbed out of the truck with his old leather bag, Cyrus felt a mix of emotions. Relief, yes, Doc could be trusted, but also frustration. The mystery would have to wait. "Morning, Cyrus," Doc called, swinging the tailgate shut. "Got your message about the horse. Figured I'd take a look." Cyrus had called him days ago when the scratching became obsessive. But Doc showing up now, right after the discovery, felt oddly well-timed. Inside the stable, Thunder immediately shifted. He moved away from the wall and stood squarely between it and the vet, his body tense and watchful. Protective, as if guarding a secret. Doc worked quickly, examining Thunder as if he'd done it 100 times before. Teeth, legs, heart, everything was fine. "Physically?" the vet asked, dusting from his sleeves. "He's fine. Stronger than he's ever been. Whatever it is that's happening to him, it's not medical." "Then what's doing it?" Cyrus asked, though in his heart he had a suspicion. Doc's eyes wandered to the barn wall Thunder had been scratching. The damage was no longer possible to deny now. Deep scratches where raw wood showed through the weathered surface. He stepped forward and smoothed his hand over the marks, contemplative. "Horses have instincts most people don't even credit," he explained slowly. "They can pick up on subtle cues, motions in the ground, empty spaces in walls, even—" He paused, his eyes narrowing as his hand swept across the scratched wood. "Even concealed places." Their eyes locked, and there was an unspoken comprehension between them. Doc Morrison had taken care of Henrik Voss's horses as well. He knew the man, his paranoia, and the stories that had swirled around his last years. Henrik became suspicious towards the end, Doc whispered, looking over his shoulder as if someone might be hiding behind the windows. Said there were people watching him, trying to steal what was his. Once his wife died, he was sure someone would come for his money. Thunder stomped the ground once more forcefully this time, and both men's eyes fell to the vertical line Cyrus had seen before. In the bright sunlight of the golden afternoon, the break was evident, thin but complete, from floor to ceiling. Suppose he didn't lose his money, Cyrus breathed. Suppose he concealed it. Doc's face turned somber. Then whoever did want it, whatever might have killed him, may still be searching. Cyrus tensed. Killed him? They told me it was a heart attack. That's what the report stated, Doc said guardedly. But Henrik was healthy. Healthy as an ox. No hypertension, no heart disease. I saw him a week prior to his death. He looked normal. Guys like that don't just drop dead. As if to echo the building tension, thunder started striking the wall once more, this time with haste, every beat echoing with hollow reverberation. The noise attested to what both men now feared and suspected. Neither, however, noticed the figure standing just behind the treeline. Still as stone, observing each step from concealment, awaiting this precise moment. Cyrus went back into the tool shed for his crowbar. Doc had a watchful eye and Thunder stood stock still, breathing slow and deep. The horse had the feeling that something was going to occur. Something hazardous. The initial board yielded with ease. Behind it lay a thin gap, a space between the external stable wall and something ancient, concealed. Henrik hadn't merely strengthened the stable. He'd constructed a facade, a diversion. Cyrus removed additional boards, levering until the gap expanded to an open space. Doc elevated his flashlight and swept the light through the blackness. It's a room, he whispered, voice scarce above a whisper. A secret room. The room behind was tiny, stone-lined, and arid despite the passage of years. On the earth floor was a huge wooden chest, its iron fixtures green with age. Surrounding it, a number of leather satchels and oilcloth-wrapped parcels were piled meticulously. Cyrus ducked through the opening first, heart pounding. The air within was stagnant and dry, unhampered by dampness. Henrik had shut this down tight. Thunder whinnied outside. The chest wasn't locked. As Cyrus strained open the lid, a glint of metal caught both their eyes, and both men took a sharp breath. Pillars of gold coins, silver bars, packets of yellowed banknotes. More cash than either of them had ever seen beyond a dream. The money hadn't disappeared. Henrik had stashed it here under the nose of everyone in town. There's gotta be 50 grand in here, Doc breathed, awestruck. Cyrus opened one of the satchels. Old deeds, stock certificates, and red ink-marked maps were inside, each red, probably indicating another spot Henrik had stashed something, or another thing he was afraid of. But as they studied the find, Doc's flashlight picked up something in the back of the room. A skeleton, decayed long ago, leaned against the wall of stone, still wearing the remains of a Confederate uniform. A rusted Civil War pistol rested on the ground next to it, alongside a well-worn leather journal. Cyrus retreated back in shocked silence. This is older than Henrik, Doc mumbled. Whatever they'd discovered, it was much deeper than either man had suspected. Cyrus gazed at the skeleton in the corner and felt the reality land like a leaden weight in his chest. This hideout wasn't Henrik's handiwork. It was older, so much older. A secret bunker dug out during the Civil War. Doc opened the worn leather journal next to the bones with care. Its pages were yellowed and brittle, ink now faded but readable. He read out loud, low in the quiet. The Union troops are closing in. I've secreted the regiment's payroll where they'll never discover it. In case I don't live, God forgive me for what I've done to safeguard it. The pieces fell into place. A stolen Union gold had been hidden on this property by a Confederate soldier. Years later, Henrik had come across it and buried his own wealth with it. But another person knew the treasure was there. Someone who'd murdered Henrik when he wouldn't hand it over. Thunder lunged abruptly, snorting hard and shrill, ears laid back and muscles taut. Out the gap in the stable wall, Cyrus was able to watch the horse look toward the doors. Something or someone was coming. Footsteps sounded outside. Unhurried, deliberate. Whoever was walking wasn't lost. They didn't have to look for the path. The steps halted just beyond the stable door. Cyrus moved fast, clicking off Doc's flashlight and pressing his back against the cold stone. Through the narrow gap they had created, he saw Thunder's silhouette blocking the stable entrance, a silent sentry on high alert. Then a voice rang out, one he recognized. "I know you're in there, Cyrus." It was Martha Kellner, his ranch neighbor down the street. But her warmth was not there. Instead, it was a sharp, icy tone. Controlled. Doc started to step into the gap, but Cyrus caught his arm and held him back. Something about Martha's presence seemed off. Too convenient. Too practiced. "And that old horse, you two finally got it, didn't you?" she said as she stepped out of sight, boots thudding against the wood. Thunder stood firm, strained but unyielding. "Took you long enough. I've been watching that monster claw at this wall for weeks." Then her hand appeared, clutching the tiny but unmistakably deadly Derringer pistol. "Henrik was just as stubborn," she continued, moving closer. "Thought he could." Martha wasn't a nosy neighbor. She was connected to the land, most likely descended from the actual Confederate soldier whose bones slept behind him. And she had been watching, waiting, plotting. "My great-great-grandfather wrote about this place in his letters," she replied, her voice low and intense. "Spoke of this stable, this wall. When Henrik purchased the property and overnight became rich, I knew he'd discovered it." Thunder moved aside, his enormous body stepping out just enough to clear the opening behind him. Martha's cold smile reapplied. "Come out. Both of you," she instructed, elevating the gun to the space. "I have seen Doc's truck. I know you are in there." Cyrus came first, arms raised, and then reluctantly stepped out. Martha kept the pistol trained as her glance flashed to the concealed room, the treasure now clearly visible. 43 years, she whispered. "I've lived beside this stable for 43 years. Seen that old man show off money he didn't own. Seen the fortune of my family run to ruin behind these doors." "So you murdered him," Doc said matter-of-factly. Martha laughed. A harsh, ugly noise. "I didn't need to. He expired right there in front of me. Heart just went out when I caught up to him. Idiot never gave me an indication of where the gold was. Just croaked before he could. I've been searching ever since, waiting for someone or something to give me a nudge in the correct direction." Thunder let out a sharp breath and shifted his weight. His eyes locked on Martha's gun. He understood the threat. He had led them to the treasure, but now he was ready to protect it. Martha stepped closer to the chamber, eyes gleaming with obsession. "I'm finally taking what's mine," she whispered. But as she leaned forward to inspect the room, Thunder exploded into motion. The stallion reared up behind her, hooves slicing the air perilously close to her skull. Martha gasped and whirled around, surprised by the sharp flash of muscle and rage coming from behind. The gun fired with a sharp crack, the bullet battering harmlessly into the stable roof. But the noise shocked Thunder. As the stallion descended from his rear, his heavy weight rammed into the already weakened wall with bone-crunching force. The boards creaked and collapsed simultaneously, splintering under the impact and slumping inward. Martha shrieked as she was pushed back into the collapsing building, the concealed chamber starting to collapse around her, and around the treasure that had already claimed too many lives. Dust burst into the air. Wood cracked. The stable trembled with the downfall. Martha backed away, her lungs racked with a violent cough, her pistol nowhere to be found under the debris. Thunder moved back into the far corner, eyes wide with terror, his sides laboring as dust danced in front of him. Cyrus plunged through the haze, grabbing Martha's wrist before she could struggle for her gun. Doc was there immediately, assisting in the wrestle to the floor. "It's over, Martha," Cyrus replied, panting but firm. "Whatever your family said perished with the war. But Martha wasn't done. Her face contorted in rage. "You don't know," she sneered. "My great-great-grandfather wasn't an ordinary soldier. He was Captain James Kellner, responsible for the Union payroll for 3 whole regiments. When the rebels broke through, he stored the gold to prevent it from falling into the enemy's hands." Doc blinked with incredulity. "Wait, it's Union gold? Not Confederate." "Stolen," Martha flashed. "But stolen to preserve it. He intended to bring it back after the war. But he was slain in the last battle. Nobody had any idea where it was, until Henrik discovered the journal. Dust fell gradually around them. The room, even partially destroyed, was still intact. The wooden chest remained intact under the rubble. Leather satchels and outdated documents lay scattered but intact. Thunder approached slowly, sniffing at the downed planks, his pace slower now, quieter. It was as though the threat had passed and he was aware that his instincts had served their purpose. He hadn't merely taken Cyrus to the treasure. He had kept him safe from the storm it released. Martha leaned against the stable wall, her voice softer now, tinged with bitterness. "Henrik discovered the journal. He read the entire tale, told me it was his by right of discovery. I confronted him, and he said it was all vanished. But I knew better." Cyrus looked over the shattered room. The gold shone through the splintered wood. Maps, deeds, and documents were strewn about like fall leaves. And there, out of sight, was the body of a soldier who had perished with his nation torn apart, protecting a treasure that wasn't to belong to any man. "Now what?" Doc inquired softly. Before Cyrus was able to respond, Thunder popped his head up once more. His ears, Martha's face paled. She recognized the sound. "Law enforcement. You summoned the sheriff," she whispered. Cyrus shook his head. "I didn't call anyone." 3 cars pulled into the yard. 2 wore the insignia of the county sheriff. The 3rd was a black unmarked sedan. Sheriff Tom Bradley emerged from the lead car with 2 deputies. A woman in a dark business suit followed, her posture crisp, her eyes piercing, carrying an air of someone who wasn't accustomed to waiting for answers. "Agent Sarah Chin, U.S. Treasury Department," she announced as she stepped into the stable. "We've been following this case for over 2 years." Cyrus stared at her in disbelief. "Treasury Department? How?" She pointed behind him at the revealed room. "Martha Kellner has been watched since she began researching Civil War-era payroll records. When somebody begins asking pointed questions about individual 1864 Union shipments that never turned up, alarms get raised." Martha's eyes closed, her final semblance of defiance melting. Her fixation had led her into the crosshairs of a government agency she had never heard of. "This is not any Civil War booty," Agent Chun remarked, her eyes scanning the chest, the coins, the old papers. "It's one of the largest unrecovered thefts in U.S. Treasury history. More than $200,000 worth of gold and money, valued at over 8. Agent Chun entered the shattered chamber, surveying its contents as a historian discovers a forgotten chapter of American history. And Thunder, towering in the shattered light of the stable, let one deliberate breath, like he already knew this season was over. Thunder stood quietly beside the shattered stable, his black eyes observing the chaos that erupted with silent content. It was as though he knew that, finally, the correct individuals had come, the ones destined to discover what his intuition had struggled to show him for weeks. "What about Cyrus?" Doc asked. "This is his country. Doesn't he get to call any of this his own?" Agent Chun, who was kneeling next to the battered treasure chest, stood up. "The gold will belong to the federal government," she said. "But Mr. Whitman will be paid a significant finder's fee. He'll be well rewarded, not only for finding it, but for assisting in the discovery of a part of American history." She held up a stack of papers rescued from the room, her fingers working through them with a cautious delicacy. "Captain Kellner was more than a lone wolf soldier," she told him. "He was part of a ring, Union men skimming payrolls from all over a number of war fronts. This discovery could lead to the solution of dozens of cases long cold." Cyrus stroked Thunder's neck with his hand. The stallion relaxed into the touch, steady and centered. Without the stubbornness of the horse, scratching, digging, none of this would have been unearthed. The treasure could have remained buried another century. Martha's offenses could have gone undetected. Henrik Voss had felt the burden of what he'd uncovered, Agent Chun said. Among his own items, they'd found early drafts of letters he'd written, deliberating about whether to report to the authorities. But he never had the opportunity. Martha's encounter had put an end to that choice for him. As for the skeleton lying within the chamber, Captain Kellner would at last be given a traditional military burial. Agent Chun vowed to inform his surviving relatives, descendants who had been waiting more than a century for news of what became of him. As the sun dipped lower and the crime scene unit rolled in to catalog each coin, piece of paper, and artifact, Thunder stood by Cyrus's side. Still, vigilant, and serene. He'd accomplished what no man had. He'd taken them to the truth. Agent Chun stepped back to go but hesitated, throwing one final look at the horse. "Your stallion is remarkable," she said. "Animals have an instinct to sense things we don't. But I've never encountered anything like this." Cyrus smiled and patted Thunder's shoulder. "He's always been special. I just didn't know how special until now." Even after the cars drove off, with the treasure, the prisoner, and the federal agents, Cyrus couldn't shake the sense that Thunder's tale wasn't finished. The horse kept sniffing around the ranch, poking the earth near the old well, trotting back and forth near the house foundation, as if there were still secrets brewing beneath the earth. 2 months afterward, there was a check. $400,000, the official finder's fee. More than Cyrus ever dreamed of holding money. But honestly, that wasn't the true reward. The treasure had transformed his life, yes. But it was the connection between him and Thunder that had transformed him. Thunder's strange behavior didn't end there. Close to the ancient well, Cyrus found a second cache of personal belongings. Handwritten letters, a silver pocket watch, a worn-out photo of a young wife and 2 children, Captain Kellner's family. The belongings were restored to his heirs, identified through historical documents and genealogical tracing. They also finally had closure. Agent Chun remained in contact, reporting back to Cyrus as the investigation moved forward. Martha Kellner had pleaded guilty to Henrik's murder and the attempted theft of government property. 15 years in federal prison. Her fixation on legacy had consumed her and wrecked any chance she might have had at peace. Doc Morrison was a regular visitor, intrigued by Thunder's ongoing behavior. The Stallion was interested in other nearby locations. Cyrus kept their visits in check. He would not let Thunder be a spectacle, but he did share the story with those who would actually hear him. During those peaceful evenings, Cyrus would sit on his porch and observe the Stallion making his rounds. Thunder rode the ranch with the quiet confidence of an animal who knew himself valuable. He had brought Cyrus more than wealth. He had brought him purpose, a reason to continue, a reminder that sometimes you need to listen to those who cannot speak, trust something greater than reason. The scratching had ceased, but the man and horse bond had merely increased. Thunder had discovered what he was searching for, and in so doing he had uncovered a far deeper truth, that the greatest treasures are sometimes hidden not in gold, but in trust, instinct, and silent loyalty, waiting to be found by that right soul. If this story of loyalty and discovery touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel. Your support, particularly in the form of Super Chat, enables us to create more impactful stories from the American frontier. Click on the video on your screen now to see another unforgettable Western journey.